This is the Dublin regulation, which was first promulgated in '97. Now we are on the third version of the Dublin Agreement, but it still doesn't work because the default criteria has remained the same. And it's also very criticized by the International Human Rights Organization because it doesn't give the refugees sufficient protection. They can be repealed to countries where they can be persecuted. This is the points to criticize the Dublin dilemma. Of course, Italy is very critical of the Dublin arrangement because nowadays it's the port of entry of irregular migrants into Europe. Let's go to these are the points of critique of populist parties with respect to the European Union, and one of the main points is the immigration challenge. Maybe the last point needs an explanation. This is a point that is made especially nowadays by the two governments, the Polish and Hungarian governments, that want to change the system of remit to the Constitutional Court, not to have super majorities, but they want to change the rules governing the Constitutional Courts. And now a quick panorama of so-called populist party in Europe. They are doing well recently on polls. I don't know, with respect to the Brexit, Trump effect that reflects also in other European countries. But nowadays there is a populist party in every European country, and one important point of their agenda is to stop migration. This is the Freedom Party in Netherlands. We just had elections. They didn't perform as expected, but they still have 13.1% of the votes in a very splittered panorama of political parties. So they all poll between, in terms of magnitude, they are either the second or the third party in each country. So it's quite boring. In Sweden, they are called the Democrats. And as they see, I try to summarize points of their agenda, which are extremely anti-foreigner, anti-immigration from outside Europe. This is the Hungarian Jobbik Party, but of course also there is the government party, which is also another aspect that gives cause to worry, is that they are influencing the agenda also of the other parties. And the public opinion in Europe is becoming more and more oriented against welcoming migrants. This is the British UKIP. This is a particularity. They were, before the Brexit referendum, they were against migration, but from other European countries. It was not a strong point to contest the migration from outside the European Union, but they contested the internal migration, especially from East European countries like Poland and Czech Republic and so on. And now to the proposals to address this migration challenge. Of course, it has become a very actual problem nowadays, migration, and so the European institutions are starting to think seriously about remedies, which are composed of a different mix of policies, either part welcoming, part turning away irregular migrants. Of course, there are two dimensions: the internal EU dimensions, the external, which agreement with third countries. the agreement with Turkey and with Morocco that stopped the flows from east and west are part of the external dimension of the European Union. Maybe on smart borders means that Europe is trying to improve the management of the borders with technology. For instance, to provide information about overstayers, people who entered Europe with a legitimate visa but then overstayed the duration of the visa, or to facilitate border access of people who travels back and forth frequently for business reasons, for instance. And an important point for Italy is the one about not taking into account the cost under the Stability and Growth Pact, because the Stability and Growth Pact establishes some parameters compared to the GDP of each country. They cannot exceed yearly deficit by 3%, and they cannot exceed the limit of 60% of debt compared to GDP. And so Italy, of course, which has a very high public debt, contests that the expenses that we face for rescuing migrants in the sea and processing their asylum claims should be considered for possible violations of the Stability and Growth Pact. Those are two Italian branded proposals for the migration crisis. The first one focuses on creating job opportunities in the countries of origin of migrants, increasing development assistance, and of course also securing borders and collaborate with transit and origin countries of migrants to check better their own borders before they arrive to the shores of the Mediterranean. And the second one is a private-public partnership proposal made by some religious NGOs, both Catholic and Protestant in Italy, and they try to manage the flow of migrants by following migrants' family, especially the one in vulnerable conditions, to get to Italy with a pre-planned welcoming steps. If they need medical attention, they will be directed towards hospitals, and families will be hosted by communities or by families. And this plan has been also replicated in France recently. So I know the Italian details. We plan to host 1,000 Syrian refugees in 2 years. They arrive in Italy with valid visas. They are welcomed at the airport. They are taken care of under every aspect. So this is a plan to prevent people getting into the hands of smugglers or human traffickers. This is the Malta Declaration. As you know, Malta detains this semester the presidency of the European Union. Of course, they are an island in the Mediterranean and are also very interested in the migration problem. So, in a meeting of the European Council on February, a plan was adopted to try to break the business model of the smugglers by training the Libyan Coast Guard, cooperating with the international organization that deals with refugees and migrants, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and the Organization for International Migrations, to try to set up centers in Libya, in secure areas, to process the asylum claims of people who arrive there. And of course, when an asylum claim is accepted, the person who has already refugee status is then directed towards a European country. And this is the Declaration of Rome last Saturday. This is the point that deals with migration. And it was a declaration adopted by the 27 head of governments of the European Union members. And they want a safe and secure Europe, a union where all citizens feel safe and can move freely, where our external borders are secured with an efficient, responsible and sustainable migration policy, respecting international norms. A Europe determined to fight terrorism and organized crime, especially the ring of human traffickers and migrant smugglers. So thank you for having endured stoically my ranting, and of course I'm available if you have any questions.